exactly 30 seconds too much material. So my name is John Scarrow. I'm a general manager at Microsoft. My areas oops, I got the wrong click here. Hold on, that was not going to work for me. Folks in my organizations really work on abuse. Now, don't think security. Don't think checking for buffer overruns. Don't think fuzzing code. Don't think cross-site scripting. These are vulnerabilities on the systems. What we really focus on is people that are using our systems as they were designed, but not exactly the way we had intended them. There's no real security flaw in the current design of SMTP for mail. We would have designed it different today, knowing what we had known. We would have thought better about it. But they're not really breaking the protocol. They're spamming. They're abusing it, and they're abusing it in high levels. Phishing, for example, malware, and our services. So this is the part I'm going to talk probably more about than anything is the abuse of our services, and not just the big services that have audiences, but other services. I'm going to give you just a few stats here. This is the kind of stuff we see every day. I'm assuming everybody knows what a botnet is. Infections on your machine that are controlled by people, millions at a time, so forth, that can be used together to do bad things. We see millions of these every day hitting our services, whether it be to send spam or, in many cases, to create accounts on our services. We delete somewhere between 30 to 50 million accounts every month. You can see some of the specific types of areas, whether it be spaces being used as spam landing pages, whether it be SkyDrive being utilized for redirectors or to host malware, or just the good old-fashioned, let me get on your network so I can send spam from a highly reputable mail service. On the inbound side, Hotmail blocks about 2 billion pieces of mail a day. Each person's inbox here probably has about 200 pieces of spam headed to it every day. So when you get 2 or 3, you're kind of disgusted, especially if you only have 2 or 3 good pieces of mail. But the amount of volume that's being sent through in order to be able to get the fractions in is pretty fantastic. IE blocks 1 million visits to phishing sites per month. We released that with IE8. It continues or IE7. It continues with IE8. And then most recently, if you were at the keynote today, where Dean Hamakovich talked about IE8, we built upon the services that are in IE8 for phishing to do malware. And it's not an AV engine. It's an URL reputation for where malware is hosted. The thing that's kind of scary about this, we knew there was a lot of this stuff out there. Statistically, if this room was full of your friends and family, not folks like you that are all very smart, would never be duped into downloading something you shouldn't download, but if this was your friends, your families, your kids, which is the biggest problem I have in my house, a piece of malware is being blocked for 1 in 40 every single week. So that's a pretty fantastic number. So take your top 40 friends. One of them's going to attempt to download something, even though IE says, oh, you shouldn't do this, you know this could be bad for your health, so on and so forth. So that's pretty scary stuff. So why are they doing it? Obviously, it's about the money. The key points I want to bring out here is it's about massive scale, typically small conversion rates. But the amount of scale is just so fantastically high that when you multiply the two together, they have a pretty reasonable business. It's multi-billions of dollars. There's some people that tell you the RBN alone, the Russian business network, is probably a $4 to $5 billion business proposition. You can take a look at some of these products that are here that are kind of interesting. These are really high margin products too. So when they get a sell, a typical pharma sale is probably $60, $70. These Viagra pills are not cheap, let me tell you, but they're very cheap to make in countries that do not respect the intellectual property rights. The Rolex watch up here, the Mariner, I was in China about 1.5 years ago, 25 bucks on the street. This is going for $287. So what do they want from our services? The first part's fairly self-evident and easy. They want your audience. I'm not going to really talk a whole lot about this except for how it actually impacts the bottom half of the slide. So this is where the Facebooks, the MySpace, Google, Live Search Engine, Hotmail, AOL, these guys have been playing this game for years trying to keep these guys off of their network because they have fantastically monetizable audiences. As a result, I'm going to show you how they're trying to utilize other services, smaller services now, to be able to get similar results. And I'll kind of explain why, but The bottom line is this guy's not very reliable. There we go. Most of these big guys have developed very complicated reputation engines. And they're looking at everything. They're looking at the IP address that the call is coming from. They're looking at the IP address where the page might be going, doing a reverse IP. They're looking at trends of logins and where they're coming from. They're looking at trends of botnets and how botnets behave and how they send into networks and so forth. Certainly they're building reputation around domains and URLs, web hosts, name servers. It turns out that specific name servers are just really bad name servers because they're for ISPs, typically for the miscreants. And so you can look at everything under that name server and build a reputation on things below that. Routing infrastructures, ASNs, networks, pieces like that, and certainly mail MTAs. So they've got a lot of investments here. Most people don't have this level of investment because they haven't really been targeted. So what do these guys do when they see a DNS server that 98% of the stuff's bad, an MTA server where 98% of the mail coming there is bad, the web pages that things are sitting on are all phish and malware and so forth? Let me draw a small analogy between this level of protection and finding a terrorist camp in the middle of the desert. We identify that camp through multiple ways, and then we will basically make sure it can't impact our services anymore. We'll just pull it off the grid. So, for example, if I know there's an MTA server, I just won't take anything from it anymore. It's gone. So now they've got to pack up, and they've got to move. So they've got to take all their servers and all their information. They've got to go get somebody else to host their IP address. They've got to find somebody else to deal with a DNS service and routing infrastructure and all those kinds of things. That's expensive. I've had the opportunity to interview spammers in the past. When we sue them, we have an agreement they have to come spend some time with us. And about a third of their cost structure is this infrastructure. Not the cost of the server, not the bandwidth, none of these things. Just getting a hold, managing, and maintaining all these IP addresses. And so this has been fairly effective at increasing the costs for their business. So what do these guys do? They want to get that IP address. They want to get that URL. They want to get those domains, but they don't want to pay for them. And they'll get them from you. They'll get them from smaller services. For example, if you take a look at, well, actually, I'm going to show that in a minute. What these guys will do now is they will go and create accounts. Think now they're moving out of the desert, and they're moving into the apartment complexes. We're letting them in. They're coming to the apartment complex. I might see a little bit of bad stuff come from that apartment complex, but I can't drop a bomb on it. I can't totally wipe it off the grid because there's too many valid, good, innocent civilians and customers in there that are valuable to me. So I can't do that. So now I have to go door to door. I have to actually look at every account and try to build reputation and understand everything that's happening within that. This is extremely difficult. And they know it. It adds a lot of value. So why are we letting them in our apartment complexes? It certainly makes sense. Why in the world would I allow a computer, a botnet, to go off and create 1 million accounts on my service in a day? That makes no sense. So we don't have the equivalent of credit checks and so forth, and interviewing the the person that wants to rent our apartment. So we've been sitting behind these things called CAPTCHAs for a long time, and it was believed that, hey, these are really hard for computers to solve. Well, who wants to take a crack at this one? They're really hard for me to solve. That one's hard too. So is that one, and so is that one. It turns out that these aren't hard for the bad guys to solve. They've created 2 different ways of doing it. And there's a business, a totally separate business, has nothing to do with spamming and hosting malware or any of those, where a bad guy can go, plug his botnets or any other service into a CAPTCHA breaker. And he will pay somewhere between $0.25 to ½ cent to solve a CAPTCHA. So what this means is when you put your accounts behind these CAPTCHAs, anybody can create millions of them for the cost of less than a penny, a half a penny an account. And in many cases, they can make way more than a half penny on your account, even if they don't get to live on that very long. Remember I was telling you we're killing 30 to 50 million of these accounts every month, and they continue to generate them because they continue to make money with it. So they take these, and the botnet goes, and it goes out to the website, fills out all your stuff. Yes, I'm 34, I'm male, I live here, I do this, blah, blah, blah. And when the CAPTCHA comes up, the botnet takes it, scrapes the screen, sends it to the service, where one of 2 things happens. Either there's a sweatshop sitting in a market where they can actually afford to sit there and solve thousands of these a day. And by the way, they're very good at it compared to us. They make very few mistakes. Or We've also seen evidence where the botnets now have the capabilities utilizing OCR technology to actually solve that more than 50% of the time. Now you've taken that half cent and you've pretty much made it nearly free. As many accounts as I can create based on renting a botnet of 50,000 machines over the weekend, I can create those accounts on your services. This is happening on the services that have large audiences today. It's also happening on smaller services now forward, and I'll explain that. When we first started seeing this happen at the end of this year, Google, AOL, Hotmail, Yahoo, all these guys got their captchas broke, all almost at the same time. The bad guys like to send mail from big, good service providers because when I see mail come from Gmail, and I'm looking at the reputation, I can't just block that mail because there's too much good mail. I can't drop a bomb on that apartment complex. If they can get a free account on Hotmail, which they can, and Google and everybody else, they can figure out how to get past the content filter. They'll randomize their content 1,000 times automatically with chafe until they get through. And then the only thing left to look at is the reputation. Well, I can't block Google. It's a great reputation because almost all their mail is good. So you'll see the spike was 3 to 4 times during that time frame when they did that, leveraging Google, Yahoo, AOL, and Hotmail's reputation. So you can imagine if you were a slightly smaller service that this would damage your reputation as a sender, whether you're sending social invites. It doesn't really much matter. Hosting web pages. It'll start to damage your reputation where search engines will stop crawling you or mail service will stop taking mail from you as a result. The smaller you are, the faster this reputation damage can happen. And there's another form of reputation. If you're lucky enough, as we were here some time back, Spam House, who's a fantastic organization that really has worked extremely hard to try to help minimize spam across the internet, will call you out for it. And in this particular case, it wasn't because Hotmail was sending spam. It's because spam that was being sent from all over the internet had a landing page in one of our services, in this case in Spaces, trying to dodge the reputation of the ultimate landing page. And so we got a nice, that was really a nice thing for these guys. I talk to them all the time. They're great people. We felt bad about this, but you know, it certainly got some action. So let's talk about bringing audience to your networks or to your sites and how that happens. Here's an example of Sherry's Space. Let me start by, how many people here have a Facebook or MySpace page? Help me out here, please. I know you all have one. Okay, come on. All right, almost everybody. And there's 2 unsocial people back there, but that's okay. How many people here have a Live Spaces page? Not bad. Better than I thought. How many people here have Live Space? Okay, not a lot. So you're proving my point, which is Spaces is not one of these places that has a huge audience. Yet the amount of abuse that we're seeing on it is fantastically high, and I'll give you an example of why. And I'll tell you how they bring the audience to us. There's 2 specific ways we're seeing. And this can happen to any service. This particular thing looks like a video. It's Sherry's. Hey, I got here. I'll tell you how I got here in a minute. And, you know, I want to see who Sherry is. Why not? Let's see your video. At the bottom, you had noticed at the bottom, all that really small looks like 4-point font stuff. What that is the bad guy's taken his botnets. He's gone to Google and went to Google Trends and say, Google, tell me what's hot today. Tell me what's hot this hour. What are the things being searched on? In this particular case, Google just announced this thing called Google Grand Central, and a lot of people were searching about it, wanting to know about it. So, of course, what they do is they go take these keywords, they jam it in here. They know that Google crawls this page fairly frequently. It's a social networking page. And so this helps raise the relevance of this page that nobody else would be going to otherwise. Then they take it one step further, and if you take a look at these URLs in yellow, if you actually crack those and look at them, they're all pointing to other hosting services, small hosting services that host a page that looks, guess what, just like this page. The only real difference is it points back to our page. And we all know search relevance is built quite a bit through this linking business. So instead of having link farms where I manufacture my own links to my own services, they're using us as link farms. And again, Google can't tell that it's a link farm because it's actually sitting on good, valid space. So I'm here, I click on it, and if I'm fortunate enough to listen to Dean this morning and I got IE8, it's highly likely that this experience would get blocked. If not, however, you'll notice the URL at the top of this. You can't read it, but this URL is no longer in Spaces at the very top. They've redirected to bad guy space. And bad guy space has a horrible reputation in Google and in live server or live search, but they never got to see that that's where this was actually going. So now, of course, we go and interact with this page, and bad things happen. And unfortunately, way too many people are happy to hit run, especially my children. Well, let me show you another example. This one, rather than doing search spamming, this is more of a mail spam setup. So I talked to you about how mail, a big chunk of what we block is done on reputation. In this particular case, they were sending the mail from Gmail. Good reputation. I can't just block that. Okay, great. What do I do now? I look at the content. Let's look at the content. There's not much here in this content to give me any indication that this is a piece of spam. So I said, well, where's it going? Let me look at the reputation for where they're trying to send the user. So I look at the fully qualified URL, which is someugly.gwid.spaces.live.com, and I go, I haven't seen that yet. Yeah, because it was probably created 5 minutes ago. So great, I'll roll up. I'll just go look at spaces.live.com. Well, that's got a good reputation. I can't block it based on that. Well, what about the IP address where it's hosted? Nope. Mostly good stuff coming from that. DNS? Yep, same. ASN? Yep. Okay, deliver it. I can't tell any different. It must be fine. So when you click on this, of course, you go to a Windows Live Space and it has some wonderful pharmaceutical products on it. And if you click anywhere on that page, now you finally go to badguypharma.com. This particular URL has a horrible reputation at Hotmail. If we actually see that, this would never get delivered if this URL was actually the one that was in the mail. So they've brought a very large audience of anybody that has an inbox on the planet to Spaces. And what's happened is the amount of volume that they can bring when they weaponize this is phenomenally high. So what do you do about this? I just go home. It's really hard. The first step really is to measure the abuse. It's kind of interesting when I look at kind of the number of folks that are in the room, and I think this is exactly the kind of attention we get on this problem at Microsoft also with our services. People want to go build really cool features that are super viral, but they don't necessarily do the steps necessary to understand how their services can be utilized by the miscreants. First thing to do, it's all about telemetry. Everything here is about telemetry. It all ends up being about reputation. You have to have telemetry. You have to measure. And you've got to see what's going on. Here's a couple of examples of the types of things that we'll use. Some of these are very obvious. Community feedback. This is somebody saying, hey, I think this blog post is garbage. There's a bunch of others here that are not quite as obvious. CAPTCHA failure rates are really interesting. It turns out that bots that are doing OCR have a standard deviation failure rate that's actually very low. They're very consistent in how often they fail. The guys in the sweatshops, on the other hand, solve CAPTCHAs 2 to 3 times more accurately than most of us in this room do. And we can identify those as well. So that's an example. Understanding your login trends. If you have a customer that's logging in the United States, in Asia, and Europe in a 15-minute time period, that's interesting to know. Understand the amount of account creations that happens. We look at that on an hourly basis. When there's an outbreak of something new that's happening, you know, our first thought is, wow, they finally discovered our really cool service. Maybe, but that's usually pretty organic growth. This is usually the bad guy has finally figured out how to monetize your service, probably better than you have. And so these are super important things to look at. If you take a lot of this data, you can also use it to understand your customer better. And you can build user reputation on your customers yourself. There's certain customers you just like to fire. And most of these guys are those customers. They're creating a pretty muddy space for the rest of your customers. So for example, if you could tie more value to an account, there's really 2 ways to attack this. You've got to make the accounts expensive to create. But boy, we don't really want to do that for our valid users. We want everybody in fast, quick, and easy. But you got to make sure that it's expensive for the bad guys. And then you got to make sure that when they're on your network, the amount of value they extract is less than the cost it takes them to get onto your network. So if there are cases where you have a service that you can tie together more expensive items, like an SMS. If I can validate the account through an SMS, if I can validate it through a phone, maybe I can validate it through a PayPal verified account, those are fabulous ways, because now it's not a half a cent to create an account. I'd have to actually get I'd have to get a phone number. You're going to minimize the number of accounts you allow on that phone number. And that really makes it a lot more expensive for them to create the accounts. At the same time, now you want to utilize this reputation to automatically detect what's going on, knowing you're going to make mistakes. So you have to have a quarantine model. When you make a mistake on a customer, it's really bad, especially if they've lost data. You need to be able to quarantine the data and give them some way to get out of it. Think about designing your features around policy and user reputation throttling. So think about, I've got a brand new user. Should I really be allowing this brand new user that's been on my network for 3 hours to send out 5,000 invitations or to do 15 posts or to invite a bunch of people to my new photo screen? Probably not. And the last thing I really want to talk about, because I'm running a little tighter on time, that I think is the most important is it's all about the link. In almost every one of these high-volume cases, they have to get you to their site to do the transaction. There's very few of these massive scale abuse scenarios where they can make money without getting you ultimately to their site. Think hard. Who on my network am I going to allow to post? Is it really important to have a link in this scenario? You know, how many views of that link should be valuable? Should I allow to even be consumed? If I send out a huge spam post, all of a sudden a brand new user's posted a link and 50,000 people are seeing it in the first hour. That's a problem. Interrupt that click. So get in the way of that click. You'll see MySpace now, who used to be getting phished dramatically. We saw it in our telemetry from IE, where I would click on something. I would think I was still in MySpace because it still looked like MySpace. It says, oh, you want to see Joe's picture? You got to log in again. Get in their face. Let them know they're leaving your network. Every click you put in the purchase stream lowers the conversion rates and makes it less valuable for them. Look at the URLs. Have block lists. Potentially have white lists as well. Just kind of to close this up, it's big business. It's not just a problem for the big boys anymore. This is going to be a problem across you know, more of the tail of the web as we move forward. They've built unbelievable tools. They know how to weaponize them, and they can point them at you at any time. And when they do, and we've had several smaller services at Microsoft where this has happened, it looks like denial of service, your service goes down, the reputation of your service goes into the toilet, and so you can't do things, interact with the rest of the web like you would like to. Your MTAs are melting down because there's too much traffic coming in. So you really need to design this stuff up front, just like people have been pounding on our heads for years, security, security, security. Well, we need to be thinking about abuse, abuse, abuse as we're designing these features. With that, I'm out of time. I'm more than happy to take questions. If there's things you're seeing that I didn't talk about, I'd really love to talk about that too. Absolutely, fill out your form. Did they give me the gratuitous? No, they didn't at the end. Fill out your form. Come chat with me. I'll be at the third place, I think they call it, for the rest of the day and a good chunk of tomorrow too. Thank you very much.